What's going on, guys? Apathettic here with all your tips, recommendations, and everything in between. And in today's video, we are talking about why Tree Dawnblade is the best competitive subclass for Warlock in Destiny 2. Beyond Light launched to introduce Stasis, which has taken the crucible by storm, and has players wondering if subclasses like Tree Dawnblade stack up against Shadebinder, and wondering if Dawnblade is still top dog in the crucible. So to answer that, we are talking about the abilities Tree Dawn has that combat Stasis, breaking down the ability regen on both subclasses, the impact of solar ability regen on Stasis, the big con of Tree Dawnblade, and lastly, help you decide whether Shadebinder or Tree Dawnblade is the right choice for you. But before that, I'll mention that I also stream on Twitch, so consider dropping a follow using the link below if you want to see more gameplay like this live. With that, let's get into it. Talking about Tree Dawnblade and the abilities that are great for combating Stasis, and we have to start with Icarus Dash. This dodging ability allows us to get to the choke point on the map the fastest, get out of bad situations very easily, and also is great especially against Stasis because starting with dust-filled grenades, if someone throws a dust-filled grenade, these grenades pull you into the center, or at least attempt to. With Icarus Dash, you can dodge out of these grenades. This is the only ability that can do that, and that for me makes it a direct counter to Stasis in that sense. It's also great for creating space against things like the Cold Snap grenade. These tracking grenades are very powerful in the Crucible right now, even post nerf, and so this is great for dodging backwards and easily keeping yourself from getting frozen and making yourself vulnerable against your enemy. From there, we also need to talk about Heat Rises. Heat Rises is great because it forces the enemy to take into account where you're going to be on the map differently. You're not going to be in the more traditional areas of the map. You're going to be floating up higher and have your full in-air accuracy. You're also going to be on more of the outer bounds of maps because you can get these crazy angles that only Tree Dawn can. This forces your enemy to pay attention to different angles when you may not even be there. So it's just one more thing to take their attention away from your team. And then lastly, we have Celestial Fire. This ranged melee has always been super powerful, and it's a direct comparison in terms of Penumbral Blast for a Stasis or Shadebinder Warlock, and it's great for multiple reasons, especially when paired with a 120 hand cannon. Take a shot or two, then throw Celestial Fire, and that's going to net you the kill. It's also great against glacial grenades and breaking those down, so that way you do a little extra damage, and you only have to follow up a couple of shots to destroy that barrier or keep that glacial grenade from being used against you in the form of a Drewski dunk. Can't say enough about Celestial Fire. It's an amazingly powerful ability and is great for finishing off kills that you've already done a little bit of damage to, and has a great range and hitbox. So next, when we're talking about why Tree Dawn is the best competitive subclass for Warlock, and it's going to be all about ability regen. We're going to go through and compare Shadebinder to Tree Dawn. So we're not going to touch on mobility, resilience, or recovery, because recovery, in my opinion, should always have tier 10 or the max. And then these two stats, I find them less impactful. So personally for me, I'm not going to focus on them very much, especially mobility, since I have transversive steps. So we're mainly going to be talking about here the cooldown comparisons between discipline, intellect, and strength. Starting with discipline, on Tree Dawn, you're looking at 59 seconds for tier 5. And if we go to Shadebinder, you are looking at a minute 30. So a sizable chunk, over 30 seconds additional time you're going to need. If you throw your Cold Snap or Dust Field grenade and it doesn't land, it's going to be over 30 more seconds before you get that grenade. Pretty substantial in my opinion, because again, as a Tree Dawn, I'm gonna be able to get my grenade more times per game than you, and that also puts less pressure on me to execute perfectly with that grenade since I get it more sparingly. Talking about intellect, on Shadebinder is 435. Going into Tree Dawn, you're looking at 418. So not as substantial as discipline, but still makes quite a difference, especially when you talk about competitive modes like just a competitive playlist or Trials of Osiris. Having the ability to get your super back faster is huge in these modes, because these modes focus a lot on momentum. So when you're able to get your super fast, you're able to get that nice momentum boost from getting kills with your super, get map control, so many different things that can be impacted by getting your super first, especially if you're waiting for like the last point or a capture point when it's a very close round at the very end. The ability to be able to get your super back a little bit quicker is going to be huge in those scenarios. So again, may not seem like a huge difference, but in certain situations, in certain modes, it can be. Talking about strength, so our melees, we're talking Penumbral Blast and Celestial Fire. We're looking at 51 seconds for our Celestial Fire. Going into Shadebinder, you're looking at 106. So here, not quite as big a difference, and so not as much to worry about when it comes to strength, which is good to know because that means we don't need to worry, or at least on Shadebinder, invest quite as much on strength to make sure it's gonna be very similar, so we don't need to dump as much stats into that. So now that we've done a little comparison between Top Tree Dawn and Shadebinder, let's talk about the impact of having slower ability regen on Stasis and why that plays into the hand of Top Tree Dawn and leans into why it makes it a Top Tree Dawn a better choice as a competitive subclass. When you have lower ability regen at the base with Stasis or Shadebinder, what that does is puts a lot more pressure for you to have amazing rolls on your armor. You can't have mediocre to average stat rolled armor. You have to have high stat rolled armor in discipline, in intellect, and in strength on top of recovery to make sure you're making your ability regen as low as possible, because essentially you're trying to compensate for the already increased regen on Shadebinder versus Top Tree Dawn, that if you do happen to get that amazing rolled armor, your regen on Top Tree Dawn is going to be even lower. And like we touched on earlier, there's not only pressure to have better rolled armor when playing Shadebinder, but there's pressure to be able to use your abilities more effectively and execute with them more efficiently, because you're not going to get your abilities back as quickly as possible. And this plays into the hand of Top Tree Dawn and Icarus Dash, because you can use that Icarus Dash to bait out those abilities, cause the enemy to waste it when they're on Shadebinder, and you know you're going to still, no matter what, in most scenarios, get your grenade back faster. Even if you throw it at the same time, you're going to get back faster, so it's more times per game you're going to get your grenade, and you can use it more freely knowing you're going to get your grenade back quicker. It's not as much pressure to have to throw that one grenade perfectly and land that kill, or in the case of Shadebinder, not as much pressure to get that freeze. So while the decreased regen on Shadebinder may not seem like a big deal, it has multiple impacts on your play, because of you're not gonna be able to get your abilities back as quickly as possible. You're gonna get your super back later in most circumstances, and that's assuming you're getting as many kills as the player running Top Tree Dawn, and more pressure to get high stat rolled armor to overcompensate for that lower ability regen. Now, the other thing we need to talk about is with Top Tree Dawn, there is one con to it, and I would say it's not as easy to use as Shadebinder. On Shadebinder, you have a lot of abilities that have a very generous hitbox. They have very generous tracking, and this makes the abilities on Shadebinder a little bit easier to use. Versus Top Tree Dawnblade, there's a lot more mastery that comes into play. It's a little bit harder to get into, but it has a higher skill ceiling, in my opinion, than Shadebinder. If you're able to master Icarus Dash, master situations where to use Celestial Fire in conjunction with your weapons, master situations where heat rises can catch the enemy team off guard. All these things make Top Tree Dawn an amazing choice in competitive modes in Destiny 2 and the best competitive subclass for Warlock. But again, if you're not ready to master all these different aspects of Top Tree Dawn, your mileage may vary. You may not find it, or you may not play as efficiently on Top Tree Dawn as you do Shadebinder. But know that going to try Top Tree Dawn again, if you didn't master it before, maybe get another try. Maybe in this meta you'll enjoy it more, because again, a lot of people are playing very aggressive with these abilities on Stasis, and so on Top Tree Dawn and using Icarus Dash, it's very easy to bait them in and catch them in areas where they are out of position. So between Top Tree Dawn and Shadebinder, what is the best option? Top Tree Dawn, in my opinion, is the most competitive subclass in Destiny 2, as I've stated, but it does take a little bit more mastery, and is going to take a little bit more practice using these different abilities and using them the most efficient way possible and not overusing them. That being said, Shadebinder is easier to get into, but your skill ceiling is going to be a little bit lower compared to Top Tree Dawn. So that's just something to keep in mind. You also want to factor in the stat rolls on your armor, and if you have good enough armor to make up for the deficit in ability regen that you're going to face on Shadebinder, and if you're going to be okay with the additional pressure that comes with having that lower ability regen, meaning you have to make sure you execute on your abilities, and it's going to be very imperative that you do so to really get the most out of that Shadebinder subclass. But you guys let me know in the comments down below, which do you think is the best Warlock subclass for competitive modes? I would love to hear your guys' opinions down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, as they're all free ways to support me, and I will catch you guys in the next one.